Apart from our house, there are other interesting old houses in our street. One of them is hidden in a small backyard. It dates from around 1400. It is in the eastern part of the large urban expansion of Ulm in 1316. The house is only 4.5 meters wide and 9.5 meters long, but 3 stories high. The lowest floor is made of bricks, but was certainly once half-timbered. The upper floors are Alemannic timber frames, which have been altered many times over the centuries. The roof trusses are also of Alemannic fashion. As the house is so narrow, there is no internal staircase. The first and second floors are reached via an external staircase. To protect the stairs, the roof is extended far out there. However, the roof only covers the upper part of the stairs. The first part is very exposed to the weather. When the residents, an elderly couple, restored the house a few decades ago, they had to renew this part of the stairs. They reused wooden stairs from somewhere else, which happened to fit reasonably well. But these stairs were now broken. The residents asked me for help, especially because they are both no longer able to walk well, and the stairs have become more and more of a risk for them. After a few makeshift repairs from below, which helped delay the collapse of the stairs in recent years, the time has come when only a new one made sense. Since a staircase from a carpenter would have been too expensive for my neighbors, I offered them an unusual deal. I built the stairs free of charge and in return was allowed to film this video about the house. A good deal for both sides, and I also owed them something because they had given me tools and materials for my house restoration. So, before I show you how the stairs were built, a tour of the little house, which is absolutely worth seeing. Let's start with the ground floor, which is now a bit below street level because of gradual filling of the ground over the years. However, various details show that there were once half-timbered posts here, into which braces were set in the medieval style. These braces served as diagonal struts to stiffen the half-timbered fields, both in the facade and inside the house. Here is the place where the brace of the first floor is set into the last remaining post of the ground floor. Very similar on the left corner of the house. This way of setting braces across the floors is unusual. Also that the post goes through downwards in one piece. When the half-timbered walls were later replaced with brickwork, the braces were sometimes simply sawn off, as can be seen here inside. In other places, too, the statics were handled quite fearlessly. Here is the old central beam, which lies under the ceiling beams. It has simply been cut off here, and its traces can be followed to the outer wall due to the absence of the lime paint. The ceiling itself shows the typical simple filling of the fields between the beams, with short ceiling boards that were laid on nailed-on strips. Windows used to be very small in the houses of ordinary people. This window shows these very modest dimensions, even though the frame is probably no more than 150 years old. Also interesting is the electrics from the early 20th century, which have survived here quite unnoticed. In principle, they would be functional. Now let's take a look at the first floor. There is clearly something wrong with the half-timbered facade here. Thin boards are nailed in front of the actual half-timbering. It is unclear which kind of joinery actually lies behind them. The shape of the nailed-on boards may be fictitious. An original top plate and the post underneath are visible beside the entrance door. The post has pressed into the wood by a few centimeters due to years of overloading the frame. But nothing has broken. Half-timbered houses are tough. Inside, the right side leads to the living room. There, the beams in the ceiling have recesses for braces, but I don't think that this beam is in its original place. This side of the house in particular was rebuilt at some point. The top plate here has been repaired too, which we will see better from the outside later. The first floor is furnished as a cozy apartment in which beautiful old details have been preserved. Here, for example, a wooden ceiling with strips. I have often seen such paneling in old houses, and often it was painted with thick paint as here. It seems to have been fashionable 100 years ago to treat all wooden surfaces in this way. The visibly worn door here, with its wonderful old lock, was probably painted at that time. The second floor no longer has the original half-timbered wall on the west side. The half-timbering here is made with mortised struts and no braces, so it was put here later. You get inside through the door at the top of the outside stairs, right next to the old outhouse. Here, too, you will find a wonderfully cozy, if tiny, and old-fashioned apartment. The living room here has a ceiling made of tightly fitted boards set into grooved beams. This suggests that previous owners of the house had some money at some point and could afford to improve the house with this somewhat more elegant ceiling. It was plastered at one point, as can be seen from the numerous nail holes, but the current owners have uncovered and restored it. Here you can see the situation as it was in the 15th century, with the ceiling beams visible in full diameter, in which recesses for the braces that once existed can be seen. There was probably once a kitchen in this area, as the beams are heavily blackened with soot. A steep staircase leads up to the attic, past an unrestored wall with lime plaster residue. The steepness of the staircase is typical for houses of this age, as it saved space and construction effort. One of the cats, without which such houses would not be complete, is waiting at the top. The medieval roof structure is immediately recognizable in the attic. As in our own house, it consists of rafters and collar beams that are joined together. The collar beams are numbered with carpenter marks as usual. With a few interruptions, they count from the north side up to number 12 here on the south side, but the southern gable is no longer original. Two beams should actually run under the collar beams along the entire length of the house, but one of them has been cut off here. That can't be good for the structural stability. The tinkering on the southern gable has also had a negative effect on the roof structure. Rafters are leaning up to 20 degrees towards the south. With only a metal band halfway secured, it's a miracle that the roof structure hasn't fallen over yet. But I've gotten used to the fact that old houses sometimes defy the rules of structural stability in mysterious ways. To conclude the observation, we climb from the tiny terrace in the east onto the neighbours' garage roofs and look at the eastern facade. This is where the structure of the medieval half-timbered walls is most clearly visible. In particular, you can see that the braces are mostly crossing the posts diagonally. This is of course more stable than single braces only in the corners. If you look closely, you can see the alteration I mentioned in the southern part of the house, here on the left. The missing recesses for braces show that, for example, about 2 meters of the horizontal timbers were replaced here. But now to the repair of the stairs. Here I first had to clarify whether anything from the old stairs could be reused. No, everything was too rotten. But I wasn't allowed to tear them down for the time being, because there is no other access to the house. For the new stairs, I choose the most suitable materials from my stock. I sought the required numbers of steps from leftover pieces of ash from my house restoration and planed them to the same thickness of about 4 centimeters. Since I also had to plane something for my work in the fortress, and I don't have a proper dust collection, everything was covered in chips afterwards. Unfortunately, my electric planer broke when I was beveling the steps. I was briefly tempted to make the stairs more durable, for example with steel stringers into which wooden steps could be inserted and replaced if necessary. But that would have been more work, so I planned the stairs almost identically to the old ones, but paid attention to a bit of structural wood protection in the details. I didn't have any hardwood in that length and hoped that it would be reasonably durable if I could keep the moisture from the ground away from the stairs. But more on that later. First of all, the stairs had to be marked, and that is, as we know, the real challenge in building stairs. I have no idea how carpenters learn to do that, but I first set the angle of incline using the arctangent of the ratio of vertical to horizontal distance and transferred this angle with the bevel from step to step, whereby the distance on the stringer is determined in Pythagorean terms from the rise and tread. But I always have to pull myself together so that I don't count the rises incorrectly. I made chiseling out the holes easier by using a circular saw and a router. Varnished everything with linseed oil varnish, which I had lightly colored with oil paint. I didn't want to use a sealant, because in my experience wood that is exposed to the weather doesn't last very much longer with this. As the stairs were just about manageable in size, I put them together in my workshop straight away. I attached flat steel to the base and welded a connection below the lowest step, which would be later set in concrete. The steel construction was designed to stabilize the lower post of the handrail. I let the steel bands on the stringers protrude a little upwards and inserted the lower handrail post between them. I didn't mortise the post into the stringer because water would get trapped here. I just held it in position with 2 well-glued short dowels. The steel alone should provide stability. For the railing, I used an old handrail from another staircase. I made rods to match, which I rounded at the top using the newly purchased electric planer so that they would fit into the existing holes in the handrail. I wanted to connect them to the stringer with butt joints so that no water could get in any mortises. When everything was ready, I took the staircase out of the workshop with some effort and rolled it across the street. There, the old staircase could finally be demolished. When I was taking it apart, it became clear that it wouldn't have taken long before it would have collapsed on its own. But installing the new staircase gave me a bit of a problem because it was too heavy for me to put it upright. Luckily, a neighbor and a person who happened to be passing by were willing to help. When the top step was aligned with the landing, I secured it and set the bottom step to the right height. Then I made the bottom step from concrete, which was also to become the foundation of the stairs. It is important that the wood does not have contact with the concrete. A gap of 1 centimeter ensures that the stringers do not stand in water. After the concrete had hardened, I installed the railing with a few carefully placed screws. The bars were also simply screwed onto the stringer. In a way, the whole thing is a cost-optimized and needs-oriented special solution, but it's very practical. My neighbors were very satisfied. A big worry for them had been taken away, so Christmas could come. Und jetzt sag nochmal, gefällt sie dir?
Ja, gut.
Super, super. Grabbel ist super.